Retro games. As we get older, and knowing my demographics, us old buggers are starting to think, you know what, old games were fantastic, often better than modern games. Simple, less cynical, made with passion by some nerds in a shed. There is a market out there for the preservation of these games on modern systems, often in nice compilations, and that is today's subject, retro compilations on the Nintendo Switch physically. What qualifies for my list? 1. The game must be from the pre-HD era, that is what I personally count as retro, but not all of the games in the collection need to be retro, just at least one of them. 2. I am allowing DS and PSP games that may have released during the HD era. 3. It must contain more than one game, otherwise it's by definition not a compilation. 4. Remakes and remasters are a touchy subject. Are they still retro if they've had more facelifts than Joan Rivers? Well, in that case, I've stuck the more extreme cases at the end of this list. 5. Retro style games are a no-go. Just because Pokemon Scarlet and Violet look like GameCube games does not make them so. Alright, let's jump in alphabetically. .hack GU Last Recode is a quad pack of 4 JRPGs, 3 of which were released on the PlayStation 2 back in the day and are one connected story. For the genre, each individual release is a bit shorter than average, but they did this to speed up development time and it supposedly come together very well. The physical release for this was in North America only via Bandai's website, but there is also a readily available Japanese physical that does have English. It's a fine option to choose. Abarenbo Tengu and Zombie Nation is a double pack of basically the same game, so maybe compilation is a bit of a stretch. This is a unique horizontal shooter that was on the NES, but it also contains the original Japanese Famicom game, which had different sprites. Same game, just looks different. Strictly Limited Games released this in Europe in limited quantities, but there is also an equally limited Japanese physical release as well. ACA Neo Geo Selections Volumes 1 to 6, yes, 6 releases of Neo Geo games, each with 10 games on the cartridge. There's a ton of fighters, of course, it comes with the console's territory, but I do love the variety. You get puzzle games, shooters, platformers, sports games, racing games. They really do give you a broad taste on each cartridge. These were only released physically in Japan and Asian regions, and I think they are fantastic and a great way to sample a much-loved arcade system by getting loads of variety on each cart. You will be playing and enjoying games you probably wouldn't have tried otherwise. Ace Attorney Investigations. This is touch and go as to whether I should include this compilation in this video. I did it because it was suggested by a user in my Discord. The first game released in 2009 on the DS. Is that retro enough? Maybe. This includes 2 games, spin-offs of the Ace Attorney series. There's a bit more walking around in these ones, you know, so you can do some investigating. This package is also the first time the second game has been officially translated to English, and it's a great package for sure. Europe did not get the physical release, sadly. Pretty much everywhere else did. Akai Ito and Shiro HD Remaster are probably not what you think of when you think of retro compilations, but these were 2 PlayStation 2 games, so they count. They are Yuri VNs that only recently got an official English translation. In Europe, Strictly Limited Games were supposed to be doing the physical, but have yet to print them. But there is a Japanese physical release with English. The Aleste collection has M2 written all over it. Forget the Aleste games that everyone knows, let's port the Game Gear releases that no one remembers. But all things considered, these are really solid shooters, and it even includes a brand new game they made from scratch. This physical release was only in Japan, and I don't think it has English. Another World plus Flashback is a double pack of games that was released in Europe. They did get individual releases too, even in North America, but this affordable double pack was European. And here you get 2 very well loved cinematic platformers. They probably won't gel with modern audiences due to the trial and error, unforgiving gameplay, but they are a part of history, and if you've got the patience, give them a try. Apollo Justice Ace Attorney Trilogy is just sneaking in here, with the first game in the trilogy releasing in 2007. This includes a DS game and 2 3DS games, each of which are fantastic detective adventures that fans of the genre must own. This release includes more languages, updated visuals and interface. It's definitely worth a purchase, lots of content for the price. Arcade Classics Anniversary Edition is a compilation of random Konami arcade games that physically was produced by Limited Run Games in North America. It includes 8 games in total: Gradius, Twin B, Life Force, and so on. If you like shooters, then maybe you would consider picking this up. Very old school, very unforgiving, not Konami's finest efforts in my opinion, but they had a very high standard back in the day. Asterix and Obelix XXL Collection contains 3 games, a couple of which were from the PlayStation 2 and Xbox era of gaming. They are simple but fairly charming, no frills, adventure, beat 'em up kind of things that, they would have filled the bargain bins back in the day, and having 3 games together on one cartridge, that's a pretty sweet deal in my opinion. The physical for this was only in Europe. Edit: in the middle of me making this video, because I have to do them over a period of time, there is a new Asterix collection, 6 games in 1, including the games mentioned already. There are no extra retro games in it, the others are just modern games, but you get more bang for your buck, and as far as I can tell at the time of me making this video, it is only releasing in Europe. Atari 50, the Anniversary Collection, and the Expanded Edition are 2 separate releases, the latter of which is the one to go for these days. It contains an absolute wealth of games from Atari's history, right from the beginning of time when Caveman first booted up his Atari 2600, all the way up to the totally rad era of the Atari Jaguar. Lots of games we've seen plenty of times before, but also a bunch that we haven't. They're presented perfectly too, like a mini documentary. Very well regarded. Atari Flashback Classics came a good while before the Anniversary Collection. However, despite having more games, it is definitely not the one to prioritize, as it includes a lot of games from the Atari 2600, and that's it, and it's definitely quantity over quality. Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 2 Enhanced Edition became pretty hot property when Baldur's Gate 3 came out and wowed the world. Everyone wanted to go back and see the origins of the series. Well, as great as these games are, I think most would agree the Switch isn't exactly the best system for them. Still, if you want some classic Western RPGs on the go, why not? Baten Kaitos 1 and 2 HD Remaster is a collection of 2 games that were exclusive to the GameCube. Developed by the same studio as the Xenoblade series, it's fantastic to see them get a new lease of life on modern consoles. Lots of bang for your buck here. The physical for this did not release in North America, so if you want a copy, and you probably do, you will have to import one from either Europe, Japan, or Asia, all of which have English. So yes, North Americans, just import a copy. Speaking of which, if you want to purchase it or any of the games in this video, please check out the document that I've linked in the description and pinned comments. There is a full list of the games, plus purchase links to any that are still readily available. Of course, some are not easy to get a hold of these days, but I've done my best. Any purchase made massively helps support me and this channel to keep producing useful physical content for you guys, and I do thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you purchase from VGP, you get free worldwide shipping on orders over $60 American, and if you purchase from Play Asia, you can get 5% off with my code Jordan2025. Bill & Ted's Excellent Retro Collection might be difficult to get a hold of these days since the publisher Limited Run threatened to destroy any unsold copies after a certain time period. Lovely. Not much would be lost though, as this contains 2 pretty terrible games, the NES and the Game Boy edition of the movie tie-in that pretty much everyone despises. A Boy and His Blob Retro Collection is a much better collection. While the games in this one aren't perfect, at least they're kind of cute, unique and inventive. This has the NES and Game Boy editions included in the package. It also includes the Japanese editions to go alongside it, although I don't think there's too much difference there. This was done by Limited Run in North America, and I don't believe they threatened to destroy any unsold copies for this one. Breaker's Collection was a physical done by Strictly Limited Games in Europe. It contains 2 fighting games that were originally on the Neo Geo. It has Breakers and Breakers Revenge. One of the few games on the system that was not developed by SNK themselves. I haven't played them personally, not my thing, but cool to have, I suppose. The Bubsy Collection must be a bit of a meme release. Limited Run have announced they are doing this at some point, although as I am making it, we don't know when. It contains all 4 of the original Bubsy games, as well as other console variations of them, so I guess it is quite comprehensive, which is nice. Although having sampled a few of the games myself, I would describe the series as painfully mediocre. Capcom Belt Action Collection is a really cool collection of 90s arcade beat-em-ups from Capcom. That's when they were at their peak. It even includes a game that never released on home consoles prior to this package. The physical release was only in Japan, but it does have English, and it is very, very affordable right now, especially if you get the best price edition. Capcom Fighting Collection and Capcom Fighting Collection 2 are two separate collections, one of which isn't actually out as I'm writing this. In each of them, you get a mother ton of classic Capcom fighters. The first collection features most of the Darkstalker series, while the second one delves into the 3D releases that we rarely see, including Power Stone, Project Justice. They are arcade versions, so missing some features from the console releases that eventually came, but each title has online play and is well worth a purchase if you're a fan of fighting games. Castlevania Anniversary Collection, Advance Collection, and Dominus Collection are three separate physical releases, all of which were released by limited run in North America, but Japan is getting them over the course of this year, which is fantastic news because each collection is an essential release in anyone's gaming library. When Konami were absolute kings of the industry, bringing classic release after classic release, these three compilations have the NES, Super Nintendo, Game Boy Advance, DS, Mega Drive, and even a remake of an arcade game, and it's absolutely wonderful. Definitely add these to your collection, whether you do get the limited run versions or the upcoming Japanese ones. Cho Aniki Collection is a Japanese exclusive release. There's no English, but maybe it's not necessary since they're two shooters very famous for their crazy theme of muscular guys flying around. I don't know if they're good, but they are ridiculous, and you can laugh at them even if you don't enjoy the gameplay. I think the collection is a bit overpriced for what's included here, but hey, sometimes you gotta pay for homoerotic shooters. That's just what you gotta do. Chrono Cross The Radical Dreamers Edition is a retro compilation. Somehow, this release seems to appear in every video I do, because you have to remember, not only does this physical release have a PlayStation 1 classic JRPG, Chrono Cross, but also a Satellaview adventure game, Radical Dreamers, now translated to English for the first time. And it's fantastic too, you get two great games in one package. This physical release was only in Southeast Asia, and if you don't already have it, you should, okay? Check the links below, essential for one's collection. Collection of Mana. Speaking of collection, the Collection of Mana is a really sweet collection of early games in the Mana series. You get the Game Boy one, Final Fantasy Adventure, which isn't a Final Fantasy game. You get Secret of Mana, the absolute classic, and for the first time in English, the Super Famicom game, Trials of Mana. Fantastic package that should definitely be in your library if you like action RPGs. If you like Square games, you need this. Commandos 2 and 3 HD Remastered Double Pack are two PC strategy games from the early 2000s. I guess there is an audience who fondly remember these, but I was never a PC gamer, especially in the early 2000s, so I don't really know much about it, but I do know that the Switch port was not exactly well received, so maybe one to avoid. The Contra Anniversary Collection is a great package of classic Contra games. You got most of the essentials here from the early era in the series, and most would say the best. There are a few omissions that make me wish that we, will eventually get a volume 2, but if not, this is still fantastic. Limited Run did this in North America, but just like the Castlevania releases, this will get a Japanese physical in the future. Cosmic Fantasy Collection 1 and 2 are two interesting releases, a total of 5 games I believe, and the only way to get the English versions is physically via limited runs release. Sadly, the Japanese ones are Japanese only. Here you get some early RPGs that took advantage of CD technology with animated cutscenes and stuff. I've heard they're a bit rough around the edges, but they do get better as the series goes on, and I would love to give them a try sometime. I just wish the English physicals weren't so expensive. I'm on a budget, guys, okay? Cotton 16-Bit Tribute is a double pack of 2 shooters in the Cotton series. You get Panorama Cotton, which was a Mega Drive game, and Cotton 100%, which was a Super Famicom game. Now, Strictly Limited Games did these individually in Europe in limited quantities, but this double pack is more affordable and was released in Japan. Inessential games in the series, but mildly interesting, I would say. Cotton Guardian Force Saturn Tribute is another compilation starring the candy-obsessed witch. This one contains Cotton 2 and Cotton Boomerang, plus Guardian Force, which they found down the back of the sofa. All three were Saturn games, hence the name, and Strictly Limited Games did this in Europe, but it was also released in Japan and Asia as well, and it does have English. There have been comments about the accuracy of the ports here, so if you're a perfectionist, you may want to give this a pass. If you're just a casual player, then, take your fill. Speaking of passing, you know what you shouldn't pass upon doing? Subscribing! If you love physical video games, this is the place to be, my friend. I'm very useful, so use me. Subscribe! Plus, you'll be doing your hobby a favor, because the bigger this channel is, the more publishers will pay attention to the demand for physical games. Imagine if this channel had 100,000 subscribers, 100,000 people wanting physical games. Well, alright then, so do your bit and subscribe. Cyber Citizen Shockman Collection is currently in production at Limited Run Games in North America, but there is also a Japanese release coming in the future with English as well. This contains a bunch of obscure action platformers, at least to us in the West, but if you had a PC Engine like an absolute boss back in the day, they may be more familiar to you. A bit like Mega Man, but with more melee attacks, and look pretty good, and I love a good compilation of good, obscure retro games. Darius Cosmic Collection, Arcade, Console, and Revelations are three separate releases, all of which were handled in Europe by Strictly Limited Games. Arcade says it on the tin, 7 versions of Arcade Darius games. Console includes 9 games spread over the Super Famicom, Mega Drive, PC Engine. All of these are early Darius games. In Japan, it's slightly more complicated since at retail, they only got the arcade version, but if you bought the overpriced collector's edition, that was the only way to get the console versions as well. It's really complicated and it's really boring. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is, none of them are cheap to buy now, okay? Just forget about it, okay? Revelations was also released in Japan at retail, and by Strictly Limited Games in Europe. This contains G Darius and Darius Burst, another Chronicle EX Plus. I love those names. However, even more complicated and even more boringer, these were split up into individual retail releases in North America and Europe. So are you following? I'm sorry, okay? Devil May Cry Triple Pack sounds like it would be an essential addition to your collection for retro game fans. 3 PlayStation 2 action games, 2 of which are considered bona fide classics, but sadly, with this Switch physical release that was only in Japan, it only has the first game on the cartridge. The other 2 games were download codes, and to add insult to injury, those codes have now expired, so don't bother. Unless you can find this physical for like $5 and you want Devil May Cry 1 on a cartridge, then fine, but if you're expecting a full trilogy, just forget about it, okay? Disney Classics Game Collection, The Jungle Book, Aladdin and The Lion King is the one you'll want if you want these retro Disney games. There was a previous release that only had Aladdin and The Lion King, whereas this later release added The Jungle Book, so it's more complete. If you want to relive those memories of your childhood torture thanks to these curiously difficult games, then it's not a bad option. You get various 8 and 16-bit versions of the game, plus some Game Boy editions as well. It's not entirely comprehensive, but it's enough. Doom, the Classics Collection, was released by Limited Run Games. There were a couple of retail-style releases for Doom, but it's the Limited Run version that you'll want since the games are actually on the cartridge. This includes the first 3 Doom games, so you've got content for absolute days, like more Doom than you could ever actually need. However, if that really is too much, Doom 1 and 2 was also done by Limited Run Games after the bigger collection. It perplexed a lot of people, but the point is, aside from a bit of extra cash, it also includes the content updates that came to these 2 games later on. I think they basically redid the ports at one point, replacing the original code with a much better one. Even this one has an absolute wealth of content, so if you want the most perfect physical release of Doom 1 and 2, this is the better option, although on the whole you do get fewer games. Double Dragon and Kunio-kun Retro Brawler Bundle is a really sweet collection of Kunio-kun games. It won't be the last one to feature on this list. 18 games in total, 15 of which never had a release before in the West. All of them now translated to English for the first time. All of them are from the NES era, but also there are versions spruced up for more modern audiences. Sadly, this English physical was only via Limited Run Games. There was an earlier Japanese release, however, not all of the games received an English translation, so you might want to pass on that one. It's more readily available, but it's just not as good. Double Dragon Collection contains 6 Double Dragon games, most of which we have seen many times before, with the first 3 games included in the previous compilation that I've just mentioned. However, the big selling point of this one is the inclusion of Double Dragon Advance. This is the first time the game's been re-released since, its original. And also Super Double Dragon, which has made an uncommon appearance, shall we say. It also includes Double Dragon 4, which most people want to forget about, but Limited Run did a physical for that individually, so it's nice to see that in this affordable package. Dragon Quest 1, 2, and 3 Collection is exactly what it says on the tin, not exactly the originals. These were remakes of the first 3 games, and not the big budget remakes, by the way. These were originally intended for mobile, but have found their way to the Nintendo Switch, and all those who have nostalgia for the NES games and don't like the visual style here, as someone personally who did not play the originals, I did enjoy these games as my first foray into the series. You can pity me if you want, I don't care. The physical release for this triple pack was only in Asian regions, but it does have English and I do recommend it. If you like JRPGs, you owe it to yourself to see where the genre really kicked off. Dragon's Lair Trilogy is a bit of a misnomer because it's the first 2 Dragon Lair games plus Space Ace. 3 Don Bluth classics, basically FMV games where you react to quick time events. Often failing is more funny than succeeding. Content in terms of gameplay is a bit light these days, but there's plenty of bonus features for fans. Limited Run did the physical for this only in North America, and it is quite expensive now because it was one of them more earlier releases. Etrian Odyssey Origins Collection is borderline, but here you get 3 DS games, the first of which was released in 2007. These are anime-flavored dungeon-crawling RPGs where you map your own, map. You draw it yourself as you make your way through the dungeon floors. For many, these are the peak of the genre. And it's also one of the most popular imports of all time since the Hong Kong and Korean versions, the physical release, do have English. The Japanese version does not. Do not buy that one, okay? You will make a mistake. Be careful which one you buy, and I will say you can trust the links down below. The document, yeah, I've linked the correct one, okay? Ever 17 and Never 7 double pack is one I would have missed were it not for the input of my community on Discord. The original Never 7 was a PlayStation 1 game, and Ever 17 was a Dreamcast game, who knew? Obviously, over the years of re-releases and remakes, they've seen tweaks and visual upgrades, but the core games are still there. Visual novels, one is great, one not so great, and the physical release is only in Japan, but it does have English. Zeus the Complete Collection are 2 arcade games from the early 2000s. In another universe, these would have appeared on the Dreamcast had it lived long enough, I am sure of it. But the games have seen various ports to different home consoles over the years, but this Nintendo Switch collection is the best. It has them both together. They are rail shooters, a bit like Star Fox, arcade goodness. Limited Run did the physical for this in North America, and that's it, nowhere else. Felix the Cat is a physical done by Limited Run Games. You get only 2 games, and I believe they are the same game pretty much. Like, you get the NES edition of Felix the Cat and the Game Boy edition of Felix the Cat, believe it or not. These were Konami platformers back when everything they did was gold pretty much, and I haven't played these games, but I think the consensus is that they are pretty good. Final Fantasy 1-6 Pixel Remaster Collection, also known as the Anniversary Edition, is an essential collection of classic JRPGs, 3 8-bit editions and 3 16-bit editions of the legendary series now in one uniform package. So much bang for your buck here that any JRPG fan should own in their collection. It is a great introduction to the series. Obviously, Final Fantasy VI is the main selling point, but 4 and 5 should also be revered in my eyes. 1, 2, and 3 are much quainter, but still worth playing. Overall, fantastic collection that should be in your collection. Final Fantasy 7 and 8 Twin Pack is also an essential double pack release. This is a double pack of 2 PS1 JRPGs in the series. Final Fantasy 7 is my favorite game of all time, so of course I am going to say this is essential. Final Fantasy 8 is not bad either. This is when the series started to really get thrown into the stratospheric heights in terms of the mainstream success around the world, and they are just as good today as they've always been. Maybe not visually, but if you're watching a video about retro compilations, one would assume visuals don't bother you so much. The physical for this was only released in Asian regions and in Europe, so if you live in North America, you will want to import it. Final Fantasy X and 10 Part 2 HD Remaster, yes, another Final Fantasy compilation, and it may be a case of slightly diminishing returns, but hey, Final Fantasy X is a superb game. Over the years, I've come to realize this remake is not as good as the original game. Many things are just kinda off about it, but if you didn't know any better like I originally did not, then this is a really good collection. You get one of the best games in the series alongside one of the most unique. The physical release for this, you definitely want to avoid the North American and European physical since those require a download for the second game. However, the Japanese and Asian releases have both games fully on the cartridge, so yeah, I've linked those down below in the document. The Gex Trilogy is a triple pack of the 3 main games in the Reptilian platformer series, ported to modern consoles by Limited Run. They have the dibs on the physical release, which just went up for pre-order as I'm putting the final pieces of this video together. The first game was pretty stylish for the time, but retrospectively the series is nostalgic, but I would say quite unremarkable. Gleylancer and Gynoug combo pack. I always forget how to say Gynoug. Gynoug, who knows. This was also a release done by Limited Run. This contains 2 Mega Drive shooters. The system was blessed with many a classic in the genre, and I don't know where these stand in the rankings for those more familiar with the genre during this era, but who doesn't love a solid shooter? Gothic classic Kyoranis Saga is a double pack of Gothic 1 and 2, 2 PC games from the very early 2000s that were very popular in Europe, RPGs that have a lot of reverence with a certain audience. The physical for this was at retail in Europe, but North America, that edition was exclusive to Video Games Plus. You can find it with the links below. For some people, these games were like the Skyrim or the Morrowind for them. That's how revered they are. They're probably not technically as good, but people love them as much. Gradius Origins is an upcoming collection from Konami developed by M2. Limited Run are doing this in North America, but you can also pre-order a Japanese retail release. I'm actually really looking forward to this, despite it having a bit of a crossover with the Arcade Anniversary collection I've already talked about, but this has more, like much more. For some reason, I've been playing Nemesis 2 on the Game Boy, don't ask me why, and I have fallen in love with it. Now that game isn't in this collection, but it's the same series. I don't get all the naming differences here. We have Gradius, Nemesis, Life Force, Salamander. Please, for the love of God, explain it to me like I'm a child who's been defrosted from the Ice Age. I need someone to do that, okay? I'd like to know. Grandia HD Collection is a really great double pack of classic JRPGs. These 2 games really give the idea of adventure with really nice production values for the era. I really enjoy these, and I think the series was very underappreciated back in the day. They really are top tier games for the genre. Limited Run did this package in North America, but there is a more readily available English language version in Southeast Asia and Korea. Definitely worth owning if you like RPGs, especially classic ones. Guilty Gear 20th Anniversary is a package I would have not put on this list were it not for my Discord who suggested it after I showed them my preliminary list. This includes the original Guilty Gear, which came out in 1998, plus what was, at the time, the latest version of the game. You know how these fighters have like upgrades and stuff like that? I don't know, so it goes over my head pretty easily. The physical was not released in North America, but Europe and Japan did get it. Haisho Same 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 contains a bunch of sharks. You get Flying Shark, you get Sky Shark, you get Fire Shark. All the best kind of sharks one needs in their life. These are NES era shooters, but you get various editions of these games, so many varieties of the same games, and this was only released physically in Japan. I don't believe there is English on it, but it's not exactly essential to enjoy what's on offer here if you're into obscure NES shmups. Humongous Classic Collection is a collection of old PC games that come under the edutainment banner. I think a good few Americans may be very nostalgic for these games. You get 6 adventure games in one package: Pajama Sam, Freddy Fish, putt definitely from a bygone era, and they probably have a lot of charm to them. Limited Run did this physically in North America, and it was not cheap. IGS Classic Arcade Collection is definitely more my style. The physical release for this was only in Asian regions, and it's a collection of arcade games, mostly beat-em-ups, that may be obscure to most of us in the West, but in Asia, these games are pretty legendary. You get some based on the Three Kingdoms, on Sun Wukong, and others, and it's a really fine selection of games that are well made. The collection does have English, and is very affordable. The Irem Collection, volumes 1 to 5. Now, this is partly theoretical, since Japan currently only has volumes 1 and 2. They are out in the wild already, and volume 3 has a release date for June 10th, but Strictly Limited Games have taken pre-orders for volumes 1 to 3 individually, but also a 5-volume pack, but nothing has been said of the last 2 volumes. One assumes that they're in the works, but as I said, the only ones that actually do exist and can be added to your collection are the Japanese volumes 1 and 2, and then very soon 3, and they play in English. Volume 1 was okay, seems a bit meager, a few decent shooters. However, Volume 2 is amazing since it has Gun Force 2 in it, which might be one of the best arcade games I've ever played. And Volume 3, all 3 games on there really do look very interesting to me. So yeah, looking forward to Volume 3, and we don't know what's going to be on Volume 4 or 5, but I'm excited to find out, even though, let's be honest, this could just be one entire volume with, 15 games on it. That would be nice. Jurassic Park Classic Games Collection is a hearty collection of some of the earliest Jurassic Park games. Sadly, it's not comprehensive, like it's missing the Master System versions, but you get NES, Genesis, and some portable options, which will only be as essential as your nostalgia allows. Not the greatest games, but back in the day, they would have satisfied Dino fanatics, okay? Limited Run did this physically. Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series contains the original 2 Klonoa games. Sadly, it doesn't have the portable editions, only the original releases, and it has a bit of a makeover. Mechanically identical to the original, as far as I'm aware, they provide some of the best 2.5D platforming that money can buy. Strangely, the physical was not released in North America, only in Europe and Japan, which is a shame. I think North Americans should have this in their collection. Langrisser 1 and 2 are 2 really chunky strategy RPGs that were made together in this package. Good mechanics, good stories. Maybe the remade visuals make it seem cheaper than many people would have liked, but you can use the old character sprites, which look way better in my opinion, back when anime designs were cool as hell. The physical release for this is kind of rare now. VGP did do a reprint not long ago, but that sold out again, so prices, they're going back up. Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver 1 and 2 Remastered isn't out physically yet, but it's coming, and many people are very, very excited for it. I think most people would agree it's not Night Dive Studios' level of remaster, but Aspyr can do a grand job when they try. You can switch between the original graphics or the remastered ones, and you can enjoy some of the best narrative action games that money can buy at this point. Many would say the writing is far better than most modern games these days. The physical is releasing in the summertime. Luna Remastered Collection is an upcoming double pack. In fact, as I'm recording this, it's coming out this week, so it's probably out by the time you see this. I've never played any games in the series. I've always found it very confusing due to the different versions of the same game. Like, even the developers of this remake had trouble deciding which versions to base their remakes on. They settled on the PS1 editions. I don't know if that's a good choice or not, let me know in the comments below, but I will be for certain picking this up and giving them a whirl when it releases physically, like now-ish. The Making of Karateka is, I guess, a compilation. Despite being titled after just one game, this contains different versions of the game, including a new remaster alongside prototypes, and I believe even prototypes of games that came before it. I don't know if the game is legendary enough to warrant such a love letter as this package is, but then again, yeah, I would do the same thing for Azure Dreams, and people would question my sanity. Don't! Azure Dreams is a great game. Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection Arcade Classics contains all of the pre-HD Marvel vs. Capcom games, plus the Capcom Marvel games that preceded them. You get 6 fantastic, hyperactive fighting games, and one pretty badass beat-em up. As someone who's not much into fighting games, and as someone who's scarred trying to complete one of these for my Dreamcast challenge on my other channel, I still think this is absolutely fantastic. Europe did not get a physical release, so if you live there and you want it, check the links below. You can import it from North America pretty easily. Mega Man Anniversary Collection, oh bloody hell. I hate it when Mega Man comes up. Not because I don't care much for the series, but the physical releases. It's just a big pain in the ass to explain. This is the point where everyone gives up on the video and tries to give up on YouTube in general. This is the moment you all decide it might be time for a nice walk. So yeah, okay, I just gotta get over this, okay? In North America, there is a physical called the Mega Man Anniversary Collection. However, the physical only contains half of the old style Mega Man games on the cartridge. The second half is a download code. However, in Japan, there is an extremely rare and extremely expensive Mega Man box set that includes Volume 2, like the second half of the collection, on its own cartridge. So that does exist, but you need to pay an arm and a leg for it. Now, the Mega Man X Anniversary Collection similarly has a Japanese savior, but thankfully it's a bit easier on the wallets. Firstly, the North American physical again is only half complete. Download code for the arse end of the series, and even Japan has that, but it also has Mega Man X Anniversary Collection Volume 2 on a proper cartridge, and it was at retail, not only in a big expensive box set. And by the way, these Japanese editions, they do have English. And you may be wondering why I've not uttered a word about Europe at this point, and that's because you should know this, okay? Capcom hates Europe. Europe has nothing but a fart in the face from Capcom. Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection is thankfully a much easier package on the wallets because both the Japanese and North American physical copies are both fully complete. And what an absolute wealth of content it has. 10 massive games in one. Very different from your normal Mega Man experience. These are more like RPGs, not my style of RPGs, but many people do like them, and they are kind of ahead of their time. There's a lot of copycats these days who have nostalgia for this series, and they want to copy the battle system. Mega Man 0/ZX Legacy Collection is back to being more standard Mega Man, although there's more exploration in these ones, so I'm told. Maybe a touch of the Metroidvania about them. I did put this collection in my Metroidvania list on other people's expertise, not mine. Again, this is complete, no download codes or anything, just 6 solid games in one that any Mega Man fan should own for sure. Again, nothing in Europe. Metal Gear Solid Master Collection Volume 1. Now, hang on, Jordan, I can all hear you say. In the intro, you said that at least one game needed to be fully on the cartridge. And in this package, all 3 Metal Gear Solid games, they need to be downloaded. That's true, but did you know this collection does have a couple of games that are fully 100% on the cartridge and do not need to be downloaded. Metal Gear 1 and 2. Yes, I said Metal Gear, not Metal Gear Solid, okay? I'm talking about the MSX games. Those are actually properly on the cartridge, and this is as retro as you can get, guys. So since this physical goes for like about $15 these days if you wait for a sale, that might not be a bad price to have those 2 classic games physically. It depends how you want to look at it. If you think of the downloads as just a slight bonus, you know, why not? $15 for 2 classic retro titles, I think I'd buy it. My Sims Cozy Bundle is a bundle of 2 Wii games that I think a few people would call shovelware due to their nature, especially coming from the Wii's library, but I know a good few people that are quite nostalgic for these games, and they say they're pretty good. It has a lot of content, and if you like Animal Crossing, I don't think there's much reason that you wouldn't also have a good time with this. Namcot Collection was only released physically in Japan and Asia, and although a couple of the games included on this cartridge don't have English, most of them do. And this is a bunch of NES/Famicom games, but also has a banging version of Pac-Man made specifically for this release. The import is super cheap, but I think it's a cheerful enough release. Neo Geo Pocket Color Selections Volume 1 and Volume 2 are 2 separate releases, each of which includes 10 titles from the Neo Geo Pocket Color. There's a few games in here that haven't been translated to English, but for the most part, they have English. Some pretty cool games in here that make me wish we had a Volume 3, but I think it's been a bit long since Volume 2, and I would have assumed we'd have heard something about a 3rd volume by now if it was actually going to happen. But you can keep your fingers crossed. I think these are really sweet collections. I'd like more, please. Ninja Gaiden Master Collection makes this list since the first game in the collection was an OG Xbox game in 2004, and what a belter it was. In fact, all three games, which I will admit were not universally loved, I think they're all great in their own way. Balls to the wall action, gory and glorious, a good old romp that will make your fingers bleed, but you'll be happy at the same time. The physical release for this was only in Asia and Japan. I do believe the Asian version is the best option because I did hear rumors that the Japanese one may be slightly censored, so yeah, plump for the Asian version. Ninja Jajamaru, The Great Yokai Battle Plus Hell is a retail release that includes 6 games in one package, 5 of which are retro releases from games that I don't think ever saw much light of day in the West. Famicom era arcade style action games. Looks fun enough, but if you want a more complete collection, you should look towards the next physical I'm going to talk about. Ninja Jajamaru Legendary Ninja Collection. This contains those same 6 games, but also has 2 more. And I personally would say the 2 that are the most interesting, because these two extra ones are RPGs, which you know I love. Of course, as a Famicom RPG, they're both quite basic, probably not very well balanced, but JRPGs nonetheless. Now, this physical release was only done in limited quantities at strictly limited games in Europe. Oddworld Collection contains 3 games, 2 of which were OG Xbox games, and 1 of which is a remake of a PS1 game. Yes, you get Abe's Odyssey, new and tasty, alongside Stranger's Wrath and Munch's Odyssey. All really fun games in their own way, and very, very different from one another. You can't accuse the developers of resting on their laurels back then. The only thing that is missing is the remake of Oddworld 2, but that was not on the Switch when this package released. Not a big deal though. Well, I spoke too soon. Kind of, since recently there was announced the Oddworld Anthology The Unlikely Collection, which contains the same things as the previous one, but also parts of Oddworld Soulstorm. But still, most of the game needs to be downloaded, so it's not really worth it. Pac-Man Museum Plus and Namco Museum Arcade Pack. Okay, I have to put these together for my own sanity because they are 2 different releases. Pac-Man Museum Plus is purely Pac-Man, ranging from arcade games to console games, old and new. It's the definitive Pac-Man experience pretty much, at least in the sense of, classic gameplay. It's the only Pac-Man collection that you'll ever need. Namco Museum Arcade Pack does contain 4 Pac-Man games, well, 3.5, but also includes arcade games from Namco's backlog like Galaga, Splatterhouse, Rolling Thunder. It's like the arcade variant of the Namcot collection, which was just Famicom games. These in this collection are the arcade games. Now, I know what you're all saying, Jordan, how can you confuse these 2 very different compilations? Well, when you're staring at the list of games and both have the word museum, both have pack in the name as well, it's really quite easy, and I need to put them together because if I don't, I will balls up the edit. I promise you that. I'll put the wrong trailer in the wrong place. It's gonna happen. Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Trilogy are 3 games that, under the hood, are still pretty much the same Game Boy Advance games that they originally were. They've had a visual redo, of course, gone all the pixels. They've added some gimmicks that found their way in from the DS renditions, but the story, the gameplay, exactly as they were back in the day. And yeah, you 100% need these if you don't own them anywhere else. Absolutely special games, the best detective mystery games you'll ever find. The physical release for this Switch edition is only available in Japan, but it does have English, and it's cheap and well worth importing with the links below. Pikmin 1 and 2. 2 GameCube classics in one package. I was gonna say affordable, but it wasn't particularly affordable when it released. You know what Nintendo can be like sometimes. But for me, Pikmin 1 is very special. I never did play number 2, like my dad had the GameCube, and the only games I personally requested to buy were RPGs, so anything else was mostly down to him. And it was a very decent early title for the library, so of course we got that one, but we never did get number 2. I don't know how much these games have been tweaked for the Switch ports, but I doubt they've, flipped the table on them. Pretty sure they're mostly the same, as they always were, and should be on your to-buy list if you've never played them. Planescape Torment and Icewind Dale Enhanced Edition is a similar sort of story to when I talked about Baldur's Gate, the collection, some classic Western PC RPG games from back in the day that were heartily ported to the Switch, but maybe not the best way to get the most out of them. Planetarium Dream of Little Star and Snow Globe. Yes, Planetarium is a retro visual novel, believe it or not, originally from 2004. This physical release is packed together with its short prequel story, Snow Globe. The physical was only released in Japan with English, and it was very, very cheap since, there's not a lot of bang for your buck here, because both visual novels are very short, but the quality is there, okay? Prinny presents NIS Classics Volume 1, contains the excellent Phantom Brave. I had this as a kid, and it's a really unique strategy game, strategy RPG, that finally got a sequel on the Switch earlier this year. It also has Soul Nomad, which I had not heard of prior to this collection, although it was a very late PS2 release, which makes sense as to why I wasn't aware of it. Supposedly another solid strategy RPG. Prinny presents NIS Classics Volume 2 is my personal least favorite of these volumes. It contains Makai Kingdom, another PS2 strategy RPG I'd never heard of before, or maybe I did see it in the shops, but the guy on the cover had too much hair for me to make a purchase, okay, that can put me off. It also includes ZHP Unlosing Ranger vs Dark Death Evil Man, which was a PSP game with roguelike elements, and with a name like that, that's too nerdy for me. Prinny presents NIS Classics Volume 3 is the boss though. This contains Rhapsody, which is baby's first RPG pretty much, but it's super adorable, lovely, full of heart. I even made like an hour-long video about it on my retro game channel. No one watched it, but I don't care because it's a lovely game. This package also contains La Pucelle, which I have hazy memories of. I did have it as a kid, and I remember it being pretty good. Although my main memory of it is when I traded it in at the game store and they gave me like 40 quid for it, which is more than I actually paid for it. I thought they made a mistake, but it got rare pretty quickly. I did not ask questions to them, okay? I just took my 40 quid and I ran. Prinny 1 and 2 Exploded and Reloaded. I initially was not going to put this on my list, but since someone in the Discord mentioned it, why not? These were two PSP games that came out fairly late in the system's life, so it's pushing it a little bit. You get two over-the-top action platformer games with fun life mechanics. They were released as a double pack early in the Switch's life, the price of which has started to go up, or at least it did at some point. I don't know what the price is nowadays. Psycho Shooting Stars Alpha and Bravo. Each of these physical releases contains 6 shooters, balls hard arcade games from Psycho, both of which are fantastic from a shooter fan's perspective. What I love about these games is that most of them last about 10 minutes. They don't waste your time, they don't drag out levels, you get in, pay a million credits, and then be home in time for your dad to finish his cigarettes. Sorry, flashbacks from visiting the arcades at the seaside. R-Type Dimensions EX is a game I missed initially when I made my list, but once again, thanks to my Discord, it was added because I forgot this is basically R-Type 1 and 2, okay? It's kind of like a double pack. You'd think I would know this because I own it, but I forgot. You can switch between the original graphics and the new visuals, and yeah, it's R-Type. It'll make you want to cry. It's unforgiving. The physical release for this was only released in Europe at Strictly Limited Games, and it was one of their earlier releases, so I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it's quite pricey these days. Ray's Arcade Chronology is a game that was supposed to be done by Strictly Limited Games in Europe, but has yet to materialize. But not to fear, since Japan has it readily available in English. Here you get a bunch of 32-bit shooters from the PS1 era. I love the visuals on these kind of games, and I do own this in my collection. Ray Storm Cross Ray Crisis HD Collection is available at retail in the West, but this is a watered-down version of the collection I just talked about. It's missing a whole game as well as some game variations, so as long as you don't mind getting a lesser product, I guess it's fine, as it's often found cheap enough these days. Rhapsody Mall Kingdom Chronicles is a double pack of Rhapsody 2 and 3, neither of which originally had English releases on PS1 and PS2 until these ports to modern systems. They are adorable, charming JRPGs that are hardly essential, but they've been unfairly described as girly, simple RPGs, but I disagree. It's just a change of pace, super cute,
but you can still be manly while playing it, alright? Rocket Knight Adventures Resparked was done by Limited Run Games. This contains 3 games in the well-loved 16-bit franchise. It's not complete since it's missing a later digital download title that most people hated, but not to worry, you've got the good stuff here, and it's worth it for the original game alone. Samurai Showdown Collection is a very almost comprehensive collection of pretty much all the retro fighters in the Samurai Showdown series. It's missing the ill-fated RPG and the Neo Geo 64 rendition, but you've got the ones that you actually need, plus one that never actually released despite it being finished. Of all the fighting collections on the Nintendo Switch, this one does seem the most niche, but it's also the coolest. Sega Genesis / Mega Drive Classics is a 50-game package. Yeah, that's a hell of a lot of bang for your buck, especially at the time of writing where this package is often found for like $20, but it might not be for much longer, considering this game has been delisted from the eShop and all other digital storefronts. It is physical only right now. I know a few people complained about the emulation in these, and yeah, maybe for the fast-paced action games, it might be quite noticeable. So your mileage may vary, but for me, it's worth the price of admission alone for the RPGs on it. Serious Sam Collection. I can't say I know much about Serious Sam. The fact that I get it mixed up with the Sam & Max series says it all. This has 3 games in the series. Strangely, it doesn't include Serious Sam 2. But either way, you get a couple of games that are retro titles, first-person shooting games. I think they are very well considered, but maybe the Switch ports aren't the best. The physical was done by Special Reserve in North America. The Silver Case 2425, the first game, was released in 1999 on the PlayStation 1. Alright, it never left Japan until the modern era, and the sequel, also included in this package, was from 2005. These are pretty much remade from scratch though, but it's the only thing we English speakers can hold on to. Very archaic from the modern era, but you can't deny they have some amazing style, as you'd expect from Suda51. SNK 40th Anniversary Collection was an early retro compilation on the Switch, a mix of NES versions with arcade releases. It includes 25 games in total, however only 14 of them are on the cartridge, 11 of them were added as a free download later on, and I don't think they ever did a reprint of this. Most of them came out inessential, more like curios of SNK's pre-Neo Geo era. But Crystalis, the NES game, that is by far and away the star of the show, and maybe worth purchase alone, if the prices are good. I don't know what the prices are these days. Sonic Origins Plus seems like wasted potential. It includes Sonic 1, 2, 3, Knuckles, and CD on the cartridge, but the motherload of Game Gear Sonic games are only included as a download voucher, which sucks. For me, they're the most interesting aspect of this release since, we've seen these Mega Drive Sonic games over and over and over again, but the Game Gear releases, very rarely, so maybe in the future there'll be a complete on-cart version? Probably not. Space Invaders Forever is a watered-down collection of a physical I'll talk about in a second. This retail release contains Space Invaders Extreme, Space Invaders Gigamax 4 SE, and Arkanoid vs. Space Invaders. Some pretty good games in the series, especially for the modern era when they had to get inventive and flashy in order to overlook the simplistic gameplay premise. I think it's definitely worth having, but there is a better Space Invaders collection. Space Invaders Invincible Collection, which was done by Strictly Limited Games in Europe. This contains those 3 games plus 8 more for 11 games in total. That's more Space Invaders than you could ever need. Strictly did this a long time ago, but the price was really high, so they still have copies left over. And even Video Games Plus, linked down below, they have copies of it too. It's not cheap, but it is what it is. Star Wars Heritage Pack is a massive bunch of retro Star Wars games. Sadly, the best 2 on here, Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, are downloads. They are not on the cartridge. However, Jedi Outcast, Jedi Academy, Racer, Republic Commando, and The Force Unleashed, they are on the cartridge. So if you can find it for a reasonable price, that's still a lot of bang for your buck. All of the games are really good, and if you don't believe me, you can watch my 12-hour video game retrospective I did on Star Wars on my other channel. It is a nice mix of games, and all of them are fun. Star Wars Jedi Knight Collection. This is for those who can't handle so much Star Wars on one cartridge. This contains 2 of those games, and they are in the same series. It's just a shame we've never seen the second game make it to the Switch, because they're all great and interesting in their own way. You can regularly find this for like $20 these days, and it is worth it for sure. Star Wars Racer and Commando Combo is a similar double pack, this time for games that are completely unrelated to one another aside from them being Star Wars, but once again, they're both really good games. You get a fun futuristic racing game, actually the best-selling futuristic racer of all time, and Commando, which is Republic Commando, is a pretty snazzy first-person shooter with squad commands, which was popular at the time. Definitely worth getting if you're a Star Wars fan on a budget. Steam Hearts and Advanced Variable Neo Geo Saturn Tribute is an upcoming double pack that's releasing in Japan. As the name implies, it contains 2 Saturn games of the arcade style experience. You get a shooter and a fighting game, neither of which I'd ever heard of prior to this compilation, despite owning a Saturn myself. I believe this compilation won't have English, but I don't think it's too important to enjoy what's on offer here. And I've heard that these games, at least one of them, can be a little bit racy, if you know what I mean. Steel Empire Chronicles was put up for pre-order at Strictly Limited Games in Europe a good while back, but they have yet to produce it. Who knows if or when they will do it. But if you're super eager for it, Japan is getting it to you in the summertime. This contains a few different versions of Steel Empire, or Empire of Steel, depending on where you're from. It has the Mega Drive version, the GBA edition, and also includes a brand new remake alongside another game they found down the back of the sofa. Now, in comparison to Strictly Limited's, this is not quite as good, since the brand new game in the series, this Japanese release does not have English. They didn't add it to this Japanese version, which is sad, but it is not very important. Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection is a very definitive collection of fighting games from Capcom's most famous fighting franchise. This Switch version includes 13 games, which is one more than other consoles, and you get the OG Street Fighter to laugh at. Plenty of Street Fighter 2 editions, Alpha, Street Fighter 3. It also includes bonus features, as you'd expect in any collection like this. Definitely a treat for fighter fans to see the evolution of the series. Suikoden 1 and 2 HD Remaster is an essential double pack of 2 of the greatest JRPGs ever made. Now, the remasters may divide opinions on their visual style, but I think when playing it, it comes together really nicely. These JRPGs are connected together and provide one of the best duologies I've ever experienced. If you missed the golden era of JRPGs, this is where it's at. And it's a recent release, and I do highly advise picking this great collection up. So many great characters, fantastic stories that will shock you and break you. Incredible from start to finish. Sunsoft is back. Retro Game Selection. Not quite essential. The physical Switch version was only in Japan, but it does have English on these very 3 inessential games. 3 Famicom games that would be filler releases on any other compilation, and that's about it. Just these 3. I applaud them for being translated to English for the first time. Like, I will always applaud that effort. And the physical is really dirt cheap. I can't complain too much, but I'm still not sure if it is worth a purchase. Super Mario 3D All-Stars is one of the best compilations on the system. I was going to say one of the best that money can buy, but that would be false because the price is frankly nauseating, and Nintendo really made a bad move by making this limited. But moving aside questionable business decisions, the fact that you get Mario 64, Sunshine, and Galaxy on one cartridge is insane amounts of quality. It would be worth the original price just for one of these games, never mind 3 classics together. Alright, maybe Sunshine is divisive, but you can't please everyone. Super Technos World, River City, and Technos Arcade Classics is a collection of 12 titles from the arcade and Super Famicom era. A bunch of Kunio-kun games that rarely get wheeled out compared to the NES counterparts. Most of them here are translated to English for the first time ever. However, 2 of the games in this package do not have English, which is a slight bummer, but overall it's a net profit. The physical release is only in Japan and Asia, but aside from those 2 games, the others do have English. Siberia Trilogy is a pretty sweet compilation of 3 adventure games, 2 of which would be considered retro, originally releasing in the early 2000s. The third game is a new-ish entry. The first 2 are considered pretty classic, although perhaps a bit too humorless for my personal liking. Very stylish and worth playing if you like adventure stories with obscure puzzles and stuff. These games did release individually, physically, and there was even a double pack of 1 and 2, but you might as well plump for this triple pack for value. However, this only released physically in Europe. It makes sense, the series was popular only in that region. Taito Milestones 1 was a bad start for the series. I don't want to dunk on the games too much, they were good for the time, but having 10 barely entertaining games on one cartridge just wasn't appealing at all. The highlight was Kicks, the arcade release, which made it almost worth it for that alone, but if these games were in a slightly fatter release, maybe 20 games that had more hits, it would have been fine, but it was overall slim pickings for some ancient games that only really offer something for those curious about video game arcade history. Taito Milestones 2 was a bit of a step up. Not much, I still struggle to call this a worthwhile package, having 10 more games, some decent, some very much filler. If this and Volume 1 were together on one cartridge and for a slightly cheaper price, I'd have said it would have been a cool package. But the highlights here are Kiki Kaikai, New Zealand Story, so I'm told, and Liquid Kid, but yeah, there's some decent games in there, but still a struggle to recommend. Taito Milestones 3, on the other hand, really turned it around because this is banger after banger and it's bringing it all to the table. The Rastan series, Growl, Bubble Bobble, Kadash, just great games that easily make this an essential title to add to your collection. It almost makes me forgive the first 2 collections. I did make a video about this specific package on the channel, so if you want more details as to why it's awesome, go check that out. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Cowabunga Collection, is another absolute cracker, and this is often found very affordably these days. I'm sure if you check the links down below, you might get it for 20 bucks, which is an unmissable price. It's not like a 100% complete package. I think it's missing a few obscure titles from the era, but Konami were at their peak with some of these games. Turtles in Time is obviously the highlight, but most of the games were good on the whole for the era. Not perfect, but despite what some legendary angry reviewers may try to tell you, they were all pretty solid and reliable games for the time, okay? Don't miss it. Telenet Shooting Collection is an inessential collection of games from an obscure Japanese publisher. I made a video about this when it released, and for the life of me, without looking it up, I could not tell you what games are even on it. But the internet has come to the rescue, and it tells me you get Granada, Gyres, Avenger, and a Psychic Storm. From my vague memories, I think Psychic Storm is the winner here, but I couldn't go out of my way to tell you to add this to your collection. The physical release was done by Limited Run in North America, but if you can't find that now for a reasonable price, then Japan did have it too, although it wasn't in English, not that that's necessary. Tetris Forever is a fantastic collection of more Tetris than one may ever need. Again, like most of these compilations, it is not a definitive collection. There are some big omissions here due to, the franchise switching publishers over the years, but on the whole, I like the fact it includes versions that have rarely been seen, if at all, since their original release. It is a lot of Tetris that will look sweet in anyone's collection. In Europe, this has a retail release, whereas Limited Run did it in North America. Tiger Heli has a pretty long name that I can't be asked to say, but I'm just going to call it Tiger Heli. This was done by Limited Run in North America. However, there is a Japanese version too that does not have English, but it's not necessary because it's just a bunch of shmups. A bit like Flying Shark, the compilation that I already talked about, this is a bunch of NES era games of solid but unremarkable shooters that for some reason M2 has treated with more care than they probably deserve. They always go above and beyond. You get Twin Cobra, Tiger Heli, and all sorts of guys as different regions and different consoles. Tomb Raider 1, 2, and 3 Remastered is a really badass collection of old school Tomb Raider when the series was at its true best, and yes, I do believe they still play far better than the modern games. A lot of people think the controls are bad. No, the controls are almost perfect for how the game is laid out. You just need to get used to how they work. This package is essential in my opinion, as it includes Lara's first 3 adventures that you can play with their original visuals or the remastered ones. Personally, I'm old school. I highly recommend these. Tomb Raider 4, 5, and 6 Remastered has finally been announced. Sadly, at the time of me making this video, the collection was only announced for limited run with a standard and collector's edition, but I am assuming it's going to go the same route as the previous collection by coming to retail as well once they've milked the higher profit limited run purchases. This contains the latter half of the classic era, the ones where everyone kind of got sick of them, but still, I cannot wait to play them. Touch Detective 3 plus the complete case files is a pretty obscure collection. Some may remember this series on the Nintendo DS. I do not, but from what I gather, they are pretty decent adventure games that sadly on the Switch, physically, it's a bit of a pain in the ass to get. Released only in North America on Nicholas's website, making it as difficult as possible to purchase for non-Americans. Like, come on, Nicholas. Tristia Legacy and Restore Bundle Pack. It does include a retro game. No, I hadn't heard of it either. Tristia Legacy was a PC game from the early 2000s, and it also includes a remake of that game too. Part visual novel, part minigame crafting thing, I'm not entirely sure. For this, the Asian release does have English, and I also know the Japanese release will have English if you update it. Turrican Anthology Volume 1 and 2 are 2 separate physical releases that contain 5 games each for 10 in total. You get all of the retro Turrican games plus variations of them. You also get director's cuts of the game and even scorer type releases for those who are really good at it. The physical release for these, Strictly Limited Games did them in Europe, but if you missed out on those, Japan, not so long ago, got them as well. Now they're not cheap, but it's the best way to pick them up these days. Turrican Flashback is a retail release of the series, but it's heavily cut back, missing a lot of the curiosities that made them pretty cool. This is just a bog standard release that includes the essentials, 4 games in total. So for the casual fan, it's not a bad option, but hardcore Turrican fans will prefer the 2 volumes I just mentioned. Ty the Tasmanian Tiger Bush Rescue Bundle is a pretty cool compilation for a C-tier platformer mascot. From the PS2, the GameCube era, this includes 3 games. Again, it's not fully complete, as you get Ty the Tasmanian Tiger 1, 2, and 4. Maybe they'd rather just forget 3, I don't know. The first 2 games are retro, while the 4th is more of a recent comeback and is in a completely different style. Personally, I would get it for the first 2 games alone. Now, they did release those by themselves previously, but the second game was a download, so you definitely want to get this Bush Rescue Bundle if you want the more complete version of it with everything on the cartridge. Valis the Phantasm Soldier Collection 1, 2, and 3 is really a case of these should have been all together on one cartridge. Released separately for a pretty premium price, you get a bunch of decent games alongside a bunch of filler titles, which together would have been great, but stretched over 3 volumes seems a bit of a grift. If you want the English versions, Limited Run did them in North America, and Japan did get these as well, but they did not have English. Personally, I do not think English is important because the stories are hardly masterpieces, but some people will say it's an essential part of the experience, so it's up to you. Personally, I think the stories are rubbish. Vasara Collection. This was done physically by Strictly Limited Games in Europe, and this contains 3 games, 2 of which are retro titles, released in 2000 and 2001 respectively. 2 fun arcade shooters that mixes shooting and close-up melee attacks. Very challenging, as you'd expect, but it also includes a brand new game in the series, even though it's not really advertised much. The physical release was only in Europe via Strictly Limited Games, and I'm guessing it's probably pretty pricey to get a hold of these days. Wolffang/Skullfang Saturn Tribute Boosted is another Saturn double pack of a run and gun arcade game as well as a shooter. No English, but hardly required, I would say. Since it's called Boosted, it means that it also includes new modern music to try and add to the epicness. The physical was only in Japan, and I guess it could get a Western release at some point in the future, but there's been no word of it. Wonder Boy Collection is a retail release that includes the 4 main games in the Wonder Boy franchise. It's a no-frill, essentials-only release that seems kind of appealing when you see it as a discounted price, but for me, it rings very hollow since there is also a much better product out there. However, it was also much more limited, and that is Wonder Boy Anniversary Collection. This contains those 4 games, but in total, it has 21 games, variations and ports of the main 4 games, plus other games not included in the previous package. It is light years ahead in terms of desirability, but it's a shame the company got money grabby and made this version only available at strictly limited games. Fewer copies, but much higher profits. Then they released the butchered down version I mentioned just before at retail, making everyone feel like they were getting a lesser product for no reason. Sadly, this better version is expensive these days. Yu-Gi-Oh! Early Days Collection is a fine collection of retro games for those who are nostalgic about the one-time Pokemon rival. Yeah, completely different beasts, but I very much remember in the playgrounds at school the 3-camp war. The Pokemon fans, the Digimon fans, and the Yu-Gi-Oh! Fans who nobody else talked to. Personally, I loved Pokemon, I liked Digimon, but I was too dumb for Yu-Gi-Oh! And his uncomfortably large hair. However, this is an incredible, comprehensive compilation of the franchise's early days in video game form. From Game Boy to Game Boy Advance, you have like a dozen games in here, many of them translated to English for the first time. Love the effort to translate old games, love it. Zero Fire is a mix of Zero Wing and Hellfire, and they're here together, and I think there are a couple more bonus games as well, one of which does need to be downloaded. It's a bit weird. I don't know much about them since the package was made by M2, and they have an eye for quality and also making quality ports. The physical release was only in Japan. I don't believe it has English officially, but that's not important. Zero Tolerance Collection includes some Mega Drive first-person shooters. I believe the original was one of the very first FPSs on a home console. This includes the original game, plus its expansion of sorts, as well as a prototype of a sequel that was going to happen, but never did actually happen. Strictly Limited Games did this in Europe, but there are still copies of it hanging around for a reasonable price, at least at the time of me making this video. It takes a long time, maybe it's sold out by now, who knows. Zombies, Ate My Neighbors, and Ghoul Patrol is a double pack that was made physically by Limited Run Games in North America. The title tells you everything you need to know about what's included. Zombies Ate My Neighbors, that was a classic. It was often in my Super Nintendo, although in Europe it was just called Zombies. And Ghost Patrol, its sequel, somehow passed most people by. Like, I had never heard of it, and most people who comment say that they can't believe they missed it too. Supposedly not as good, but still a solid title. Now, this next bunch of games, they are going to contain remakes or games with very heavy remastering, so much so it makes me wince at the idea of calling them retro games. They generally are under the hood, but they really don't look like it. So if you don't want to include them, just close your eyes and your ears, okay? But keep the video on, okay? I could do with the watch time, thank you very much. Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp is a remake of the original 2 Game Boy Advance strategy games, visually very different, and I would say very unappealing. Like, who would trade the gorgeous pixel art for this plasticky cheap crap? I don't know. But the gameplay, the core gameplay should be the same, right? I don't know, I haven't played these remakes, but I would assume under the hood they are untouched. Let me know in the comments below. Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy is a fine collection of 3 remakes of PlayStation 1 games. Although I played my fair share of Crash back in the day, time has clouded my memories about how faithful these remakes are. Visually, they are top banana though, and bring us back to a better, more unforgiving time when it came to 3D platformers. Definitely worth adding to your collection. Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania. Once again, my Discord is helping me out here since I had forgotten that this is a remake of Super Monkey Ball 1 and 2. 2 games that are instant classics. However, I think most hardcore Monkey Ball fans will say the physics don't feel right. They are not one-to-one, and it kind of spoils the vibe or something like that. However, this physical is dirt cheap these days, so it's still worth the punt. Toki Tori Collection was also suggested in my Discord. However, these are almost certainly heavy remakes that I'm told retain the original feel of the games, but it's hard to say because these were Game Boy games and, you know, just look at them now, they just don't look like it. Now, but Super Rare Games did this exclusively to them in Europe. I don't think it's ridiculously expensive these days or anything, but it definitely won't be as cheap as it probably should be. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. I know these are remakes built from the ground up, so I don't know if they fully belong in this video, but their heart is there, right? Even mechanically quite similar. However, this was a very successful release that people really loved. Perfect arcade skateboarding action. Now, the Switch physical release does say download required on the box. However, the single player content is all on the cartridge, okay? The download is only for multiplayer content. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 is an upcoming release. Again, I'm including them in this section because I think they would maybe cross the line since it was really built from the ground up, and as far as we know, the fourth game has had significant changes to the career mode. The Switch box once again says download required, but we don't know what that concerns as of yet. I don't want to assume it's going to be like the previous package, but it could be. That was a lot of retro compilations. What is your favorite compilation? Which ones do you own? Which ones do you recommend others pick up? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to purchase any of the ones that are still readily available, please use the document linked down below in the description and pinned comment. It is the best way to support me, or you can join my Patreon to get these long videos ad-free. I do appreciate it, and I hope you all have a fantastic day. Take care.